All right. Well, I can't tell who's out there. I can tell there's 47 people joined so far. So thank you all so much for joining us for our rain garden webinar today. I just have a few things. Can you guys see my screen? The webinar information, is that posted right now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so here are some guidelines. First, I'm Denise Delaney. I'm the Grow Green Program Coordinator, and I have some awesome colleagues, Katie Duffy and Nicole Miller, that are going to help me behind the scenes, and also Jeff Sorensen. We have great speakers today I'm very excited about. I'm going to have the speakers introduce themselves. I am going to turn it over to Paige Olivero, and she is with Urban Patchwork. And Paige, I'll let you introduce yourself further than that, but she's going to tell us why in the world should we be wanting to catch rain in the first place. So thank you, Paige, and I'm going to turn off my mic.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I understand there's quite a few people signed up today. So that just tells me a lot of folks are interested in this topic and interested in rain. Why not? We seem to be out of it lately, although this coming week looks like it's going to be promising for the hill country and our water sources. So hopefully that rain that they're predicting comes through. My name is Paige Oliverio. I'm with Urban Patchwork, and I work on community resilience programs and partner with the city on various programs, like one that we just wrapped up a pilot phase on called Raincatcher Austin. You can go to raincatcheraustin.org to look at some historical information about what we were up to for the last several years. You can also let us know if you're interested in that program coming to your neighborhood. There's a little poll, and there's a little trick in the poll. It asks you what watershed you're in. So if you don't know what watershed your house and your neighborhood is in, there's a handy link to the City of Austin's website that has a way for you to figure out what watershed your address is in. And then you can find out what watershed you're in, where your water that falls on your property goes after it leaves your property. Hopefully it doesn't. We're going to talk about that today. And then you can let us know if you want the Raincatcher Austin program to come to your neighborhood next, because we're not sure where we're going to go next. I have professionally worked in landscaping with a focus on water and drainage for 20 years. So you could say I'm a little bit of a geek about water, and I really love the richness of rain and what happens with it. So that's why I'm here to talk to you first to kick off this meeting with why are we catching rain? For one reason, our cities are created with a lot of impervious cover, and that impervious cover can affect the water cycle, and it can kind of put a break in that water cycle where normally water falls on the earth. Some of it runs off into like lakes and rivers. A lot of it soaks into the ground. But in cities, we've got lots of pavement, we've got lots of rooftops, we've got even yards actually can act like concrete sometimes if the soil is super compacted, super dry, not healthy. The water can actually fall on a lawn and run off as if it's falling on a sidewalk. So one of the things about catching and holding rain on your property is you're helping revive that natural water cycle that the ecosystem wants to have. Another thing that a lot of people don't know is rain actually has in it lots of micronutrients and minerals and things like that. Even things like washing poop off of a roof, that's a nutrient. There's nitrogen naturally in the rain. Lightning, when it strikes during a rainstorm, actually adds nitrogen to the rain, and then it falls on the earth, and then it nourishes your plants. So when you hear folks like the Austin Water Utility talk about, we want you to use rainwater on your landscaping instead of city water, part of that is because rainwater is healthier for your plants. The city water has been treated to make it, safe for you to drink in your house, but all those micronutrients have been removed. So when we're thinking about healthy soil, reviving the soil, nutrients, rainwater is going to be a lot healthier and happier for your trees, your plants, your soil organisms. We have hard water in the city. It means it's a lot more alkaline instead of acid based. And a lot of times, so rainwater is going to be neutral. It's going to offset the impact of our hard water that we pull from our groundwater and from our aquifers and from our rivers and lakes. That's infused with a lot of alkalinity from the limestone around central Texas. And so when we use rainwater to balance that, it's going to offset the alkalinity in the soil, and plants like neutrality / a hint of more acidic soil. So if you're getting that rainwater in there instead of just the water from your hose and from your irrigation, you're going to offset that impact of the alkaline water. Catching and holding rain on your local property helps downstream from your property as well. So anything that's been settling on your roof before the rain hits it, like pollen, bits of insects, bird poop, just dust that's been flying around because it's dusty, anything that's been in the air, that rainwater, if it washes off your roof and goes into the soil first before going down into the drain system, your soil is going to catch those contaminants and hold on to it. It's going to use some of them and then mitigate some, like oil from dripping in your driveway, little things like that. And sediment even is considered a pollutant when you're talking about the stormwater system. You know, lots of dirt just rushing off and eroding into the creeks is problematic. And so that's considered a pollutant in that part of the system. So anytime that we can catch and hold that rain on the soil on your property and let it soak in, that ground is going to naturally treat that water. And by the time that water soaks through and either ends up in the aquifer or ends up in a nearby creek, it's going to be a lot cleaner, and it's going to be moving slower, which is healthier for all of the water system. It's healthier for your soil. It's healthier for the creeks, and it gets cleaned out that way naturally. It's water that you catch and hold on site, supports wildlife and plants that are throughout a drought. One of the things that we've done with the Raincatcher Austin program is we've created systems where we're catching and holding rain either in rain gardens or tanks, which is not in today's topic, but we're always available for questions about that. And then we slowly let water out into the rain gardens and at the base of trees that we've planted. And one of the things that does, a rain garden is a really cool way to create what we call a lens of water in your soil underground. So as you're collecting and holding rainwater in that rain garden, it'll slowly soak in, and then it kind of stays down there under your soil. And then the plants that are deep rooted, like trees and native perennials, grasses, over the course of time, they access that lens of water that kind of rests underground, and then they naturally draw it back up into their roots. So what that does is, say there's a period of 2 months where you're not seeing rainfall. Well, what happens is those trees that are supported by that lens are going to make it through that drought period and be stronger. And they're also going to establish deeper tap roots than trees that don't have access to some kind of water like that. So rain gardens are really good. They mimic something that happened in nature before we came through with cities and said everything needs to be flat. There used to naturally be these depressions in the ground, in the fields, in the forests, where water always would just kind of be and soak in and then soak on down to the aquifer. Well, we've kind of removed that formation in cities. And so what we're doing with rain gardens is we're bringing that formation back so that there's water stored in the soil underneath for those trees and those perennials to use throughout the summer. Also, rain gardens and catching and holding rain helps with any erosion and drainage issues that you might be having at your home or nearby in the neighborhood. This picture is an example of a few different types of swales and dry creek beds and rain gardens that, I mean, these things can be shaped like anything. I've even created what I call drip line gardens where, you know, if you don't have gutters on your house and you've got erosion happening where rain is coming right off the roof and hitting right below in that line at your foundation and it's eroding, you know, there's a way that you can actually catch and hold even that rain in a garden that's right next to your foundation. It can even out the moisture of your foundation so that you can avoid having cracks if you have if you have a concrete, you know, house foundation. And it can even catch water that you don't see every day. Oftentimes there's condensation happening in the mornings and the water is just lots of little baby drips coming off your drip line every morning that you're just kind of completely losing. And with a drip line garden, you're catching even those drips. And I've seen with some of them all throughout the summer, the little garden bed never needs to be watered with the irrigation because there's just enough water coming from that condensation every morning from the drip line. So there's little ways, like if you've got a tight space and if you've got you know, small yards or, you know, some like air conditioner or trees that you got to work around, you can do things like rain gardens and swales in a small space. And I know that's going to be covered probably even more in the design conversation later, so I won't dwell on it, but it definitely, these kinds of features help a lot with erosion, and downstream, again, it helps with erosion in our creeks, because if we've got all of this water coming off of our roofs and our streets and going into the creeks, we get massive amounts of erosion. And then we have to, it's expensive to mitigate, and it causes problems all the way down to the river. Another real big thing that's been going on lately is we've not just had drought in the summers. We've had drought all year long now instead of just during a season. And then we also have had several situations over the last few years where, like in the summer or more so in the winter, we've had these extensive freezes that have taken out electric grids and water systems. So, I mean, I remember one year for 2 weeks, we were driving water around, or people were meeting in community spaces to get bottled water for 2 weeks after a storm, because there was no other source for the water. Water mains everywhere had broken, and it took a long time for that city infrastructure to come back online. So people were needing to, and water, of course, was out of the stores, because what we do, we run the HEB every time it's going to snow and the store's shelves are empty. And so people were trucking water in from other cities. I was hauling water around for 2 weeks to people in apartments who didn't have water. So if there is an emergency, if folks have water stored, and I know this is a little bit more about tanks, but we usually talk about tanks paired with rain gardens for that backup. You know, if you've got water stored and you're supporting your soil and you need, you know, support in your neighborhood and your house, you've got that in your system.
Thank you so much, Paige.
Thank you.
Drew is online now. Drew Sloat is a landscape architect with the Watershed Protection Department. And we're lucky we have engineers and landscape architects and biologists in our department, but he knows a lot about rain gardens, the bigger kind, but for today he's going to focus on the residential size rain gardens. So I will let him share anything else he'd like to about his background. And Drew, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Denise. Thanks for having me, and thanks for everybody for attending. As Denise said, I'm a landscape architect with Watershed Protection. What I mostly do is design larger scale green infrastructure, as well as manage projects that are designed by outside consultants. So generally, our group focuses on putting green infrastructure in parts of town that developed before we had stormwater controls. So we do a lot of retrofitting of things. So what I want to present today is sort of a short guide on residential rain gardens. Okay, so basically rain gardens, as everybody knows, are just shallow depressions that catch rainwater from impervious surfaces. Kind of have two general basic types: the commercial stuff, which we won't be dealing with today, and residential stuff, which is the focus of today. It's a lot simpler and more applicable to what we're trying to do here. This is an example of what everybody thinks of when they think of a rain garden around town. It's been in a lot of things. So, you know, it's naturalistic, it's planted up, lots of plants, you know, water in the bottom. I'm going to go over the whys just a little bit because Paige covered it probably way better than I do. But the general reason we do all of the green infrastructure is what we call urbanization. Basically, when we create these impervious surfaces that cause the water to run off, and then it goes off into the creeks and causes all sorts of problems. Those issues are addressed in a lot of ways at larger scales, but the rain gardens are sort of a bonus. So main reasons we need to build them are climate change, erosion, stream degradation, pollution, and also water supply. Climate change, we'll go over this, just gloss over this because Paige covered it better. It's just, you know, getting hotter and the rain's more unpredictable. In addition, the weather is both hotter and colder than it's usually been, so it creates a lot of issues to be dealt with. This is just a few more examples. You can go over this at a later date. Some examples of erosion, stream degradation, the increased flows and the increased duration of flows that are caused by the urbanization put a lot of water through the creeks and tear stuff up. This is an example up here on the top is an example along Shoal Creek where it's basically eating into a bluff. And the city has been working with the property owners for years now, trying to establish a solution to a problem that was created essentially upstream. This other image is sometimes even when we fix it, it's not enough because there's just so much development upstream. This is an example of what we sometimes have to do to repair all the extra runoff and things and what they do to the creeks. And the fact that historically, a lot of these creeks are in people's backyards and, you know, weren't very well protected. So we have to come in and put retaining walls and a lot of hard infrastructure because we're restrained in spaces. And we even have things like in the olden days, the water department put the sewer lines in the creeks because they were the low spot. And that was just, you know, logical to them at the time. So we have a lot of these that we're working on taking out and abandoning as part of those repairs over time. A big ugly one, of course, is the pollution from all the non-point source as well as point source pollution. Non-point source being things like brake dust and rubber tires, other things that land all over everything, and when it rains, they get washed in. Other stuff is like oil from leaking cars and things that's really common. You can see it's pretty gross. And then Christopher will cover this probably more, but we're also growing incredibly fast and we already have water supply issues. So using rainwater in rain gardens helps not have to use treated water that we just simply don't have. This is sort of the projected growth. We're over here right now, about 1.5 million people projected to grow to 4 million. And as you can see, we just don't have this water. I mean, this is already where we're at during the 2008 to 2016 drought. Canyon Lake is still pretty much like this, and all over Central Texas, water supply is a big issue. Rain gardens are part of both our regulatory stuff that we do for development and also part of the structural benefits of rain gardens, help manage the runoff, reduce flooding. There's aesthetics. There's a lot of environmental services that you can do with the extra vegetation, like urban heat island mitigation with trees and shrubs, carbon capture, capturing the water and infiltrating it helps with groundwater recharge. Wildlife habitat, pollinator habitat, all part of the proposed rain gardens that I'm going to go over. So getting to the part of how we do this. This is what a lot of people are going to expect rain gardens, from all of the things on the internet. This is, an example for Portland. Austin is always going to look really different. So starting with how to do it, the first thing is figuring out where to put it. You'll see a lot of advice on the internet and in other books and things about placing rain gardens in low spots. I generally don't suggest low spots unless you can find a way to drain it, because low spots tend to be boggy and they don't drain very well. And that's a sort of a different situation that we want to avoid wet spots if we can. Also, you want to stay at least 5 feet away from your house. And if you have a basement, you want to stay more than that, about 10 feet. And generally speaking, don't build in the right of way, but definitely if you're going to work within the right of way, call the utility location line here, because you definitely don't want to hit a utility line. It's very expensive and it's also pretty dangerous. Generally, I would recommend picking spots in full sun to partial sun, and make sure that you plan your overflow from your rain garden to where it continues on, the direction that your drainage is currently. Most houses that are in newer subdivisions drain from the back of the lot to the front, but whichever direction your water is draining, run it through your rain garden and then let it continue on so that you don't create problems for your neighbors, or for yourself. You don't want it to flow out of the rain garden, then just pond against the back fence and not drain away. Generally avoiding steep slopes, because it's more complicated to build on steep slopes, and it's less effective because you have a lot more structure you have to add to deal with the grade changes. So it's also much more expensive. Another 2 things to definitely avoid: bedrock, which sometimes you'll find very shallow here, and septic systems, which most people don't have anymore, but some do. There's one at my house, for an example. Rain gardens can take on essentially 2 basic forms of informal, just sort of into the landscape with flowing shapes, or it can take something more formal. It depends on what you're really looking for and what your existing landscaping's like. If you have a formal landscape, you probably want to continue that with a formal rain garden. All right, nuts and bolts of getting started. Once you've determined where it goes and how you want to do it, first step is to dig a hole. I generally recommend a sharpshooter, which is a sort of a long, narrow shovel, because you can dig sort of a straight down hole, or post hole diggers. You don't want to pry a lot and fracture the soil around the hole, because that will throw off the readings, because it'll let the water bleed out into the side. So dig a hole about 1 foot deep, about 6 inches across, fill it up, let it drain out, and then fill it up again. And generally, the measuring is less important than whether or not it drains a second time within 24 hours. If it drains twice within 24 hours, you have a pretty good place to build a rain garden. And then you need to determine how big a rain garden you need to do. So the little calculations on where you're collecting the rainwater. You can see this graphic has 1/4 of the roof with a downspout coming down here, the roof is 15 by 30. So you just divide that by 6, and that tells you you've got 75 square feet to catch a 1-inch storm in a 6-inch deep rain garden. That's a pretty good happy median. Most storms are smaller than 1 inch, and you don't really want to try and catch all the water from bigger storms. You always want to be able to bypass, because we get storms from 1/4 inch to 6 inches, and you just 85% of them will be caught and infiltrated in this 1-inch runoff. So to simplify everything, just divide your drainage area by 6, and then you get your square footage. I put the math on how to actually, if you want to change up, do a deeper rain garden or a shallower rain garden because your percolation test didn't come out the way you wanted it. You can vary that to get, the size for your different types and different sizes of runoff areas and soils. This is just some quick guidelines of how big roughly things are. So now that you've got everything determined, you know where you want to put it. You gotta kind of do your layout and start removing the soil surface and all the plants. Dig all that stuff out, and then excavate your basin to about 6 inches. Slope the sides so that they don't erode too much. And a shallow hole like this, 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 is usually fine, because they're very shallow and they won't erode too much. But in larger basins, we use 3-to-1, which, when I say 3-to-1 or 1-to-1, it means there's 1 foot of rise for 3 feet of run. So the bank slopes over 3 feet to rise 1 foot. And then you want to create the enclosure of your basin with the soil that you're excavating. Generally go a couple of inches higher than your outfall elevation, which is to direct that water to where it overflows in one place. If you make it completely level, it will tend to overflow and then cause some localized soil collapse, and it'll come out in places you didn't predict. So give yourself some extra dirt over there to allow you to direct that water. After you've got your basin shaped, go through with something like a spading fork and loosen the bottom. You don't necessarily want to dig it up and turn it over. And then mix in a little well-composted compost. If you can't find well-composted compost, I would omit this for this type of rain garden, because we're going to be using native plants, and they don't necessarily need it. And sort of raw, fresh compost will tend to leach nutrients, and that does the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. As water comes into a rain garden, we generally want to bring it all the way to the bottom. So you might need to do some bank protection and then a splash pad on the bottom. So when the water comes in from your gutter or your downspout, find a non-erosive way to take it down to the bottom of the basin so it can then spread across the whole basin. This is sort of a graphic of how you would accomplish that leveling. Couple of different ways. This is a string with a level. Usually it's a little mason's level that they hook onto the twine, call it a string level, or you can use a board. Or for larger rain gardens, you can use a water level. That one's actually a lot faster and a lot easier because it's level anywhere and you don't have to move the string a lot to measure. All right, so now we're to sort of the meat of the design and the planting. It's the plants. As Paige said earlier, it can really be as simple as just putting sod back. And a lot of our right-of-way rain gardens, that's what we do because we have a lot of things to manage. And if Maintenance is an issue that works actually very well. Sod rain gardens perform very well. They catch a lot of sediment. They remove a lot of pollutants. So don't be afraid to use sod. Other thing to note is that rain gardens are dry almost all the time. So you don't want to assume that they're wetlands. So you don't want to use a lot of wetland plants. And most plants that you find in the landscape will work in a rain garden. Things like cactuses and things that are really hardcore desert stuff probably won't, but you would be surprised what actually will work. But like I said, I'm trying to suggest that you do a very simple, basic thing that's primarily with native plants. But these are some of the factors that you want to take into account as you go through your plant list. These have a couple of resources that are recommended for Austin. One is this Grow Green guide that Watershed puts out. It covers basically all of the really common adapted sort of bulletproof landscape plants that are used in the Austin area. It's definitely not every plant that you can use. For especially an extended amount of information on native plants, the Wildflower Center has a native plant database that's searchable. You can load in all the different characteristics that you're trying to meet, like bloom height, bloom season, plant size, whether you're looking for something that's woody or herbaceous annuals. You can put all sorts of things in here and come up with all kinds of plants. And then we come to sort of the bulletproof recommendations. These are plants that we use here at the city for our stuff that has really, really low maintenance. We don't use irrigation for any of Watershed's rain gardens. So all these things are capable of taking sun, water, a little bit of shade, and very low maintenance. So like I said, these are essentially bulletproof. Just a couple of factors when you're laying out the plants. Your inlet is going to have water rushing in, and you don't want to block it. So avoid tall plants. This really should have like a splash pad where it says inlet to help get that water to the bottom so then it can distribute it across. This lower picture is showing how the water comes into this rain garden and then is directed through the different tiers, and how the planting doesn't really obstruct the flow of water too much. It is still encouraged to spread laterally, but then when it overflows to the next level, it's directed and not blocked. How to get the water to the rain garden. Most of the time, it's going to be coming from gutters, so you're going to have downspouts and splash blocks. Probably not going to be close enough because you don't want to be right next to the foundation. So different ways to extend that. You can use as we used here, rocks, pavers. You can do turf reinforcements, which are mats that are in grass that you can't even really tell are there. You can use porous pavers, lots of different things. And then especially for overflows, swales are a really nice way for when the water is, filled up the rain garden, you want to take it out to where it's ultimately going to go, or you're taking it from the backyard to the front yard, something like that. A swale, this being a lot like a dry stream bed, but others of them can be planted if you have the light to make that work. They also do some sediment trapping and infiltration with this water as it continues on through the property. On the rare occasion you don't have gutters, in addition to Paige's solution of having a garden that sort of traps the water directly, you can do a French drain, which is essentially a trench with gravel in it that catches that water and then dissipates the energy it has from that fall and then collects it in a pipe, and you can then take that onto your rain garden. A few more examples. You can extend the downspout and goes all the way out. A couple more rock channels. This one can also be for collection. You can do a trench drain, like across a driveway to catch the water. They usually come with less decorative grates, but this is a really nice one. Some alternate water collection areas to just roofs. You can also use driveways. In this instance, they basically put a garage door seal across their driveway and use it to catch the water that's coming off of the house, from the downspout, from the garage, from the whole driveway, and then running it through a series of rain gardens that are tiered because of the slope. So just another way you can harvest water and put it through a rain garden. One thing to be careful with is not using pool backflush water. There's a lot of chemicals in there that are very damaging to the plants in the soil. So it's better to take that into the regular sewer so it can run through a water treatment plant. And here's sort of an example of the sort of native garden that I'm suggesting that you build with a lot of plants, not a lot of bare spaces in here to allow weeds to grow. There's a few, but this does a really great job of breaking down the pollutants, collecting the sediment, protecting the soil surface, infiltrating the water. So it's just a prototype of the type of rain garden that I think we should be building. This is essentially just a quick chart that gives you an idea of how many plants you might use. As you can see, it can be a lot of plants. I would advocate for using smaller plants. I think they adapt a lot better, especially the native plants. Sometimes very hard to find in larger sizes. And also don't be afraid to use seed in rain gardens. It can save a lot of money and get a lot more diversity that you would get from doing it with container plants. And it kind of provides nature's influence and where things go. They will tend to come up in a spot that they like in the rain garden versus a spot that they don't like. So if you have differing sun and soil and moisture things from a seed mix, the plants that want to be in that particular spot tend to predominate in that spot and take over the garden. So like I said earlier, I don't really recommend a lot of soil amendments, especially not a really rich young compost, because you don't want a lot of nutrient export, but you do want to aerate the soil to help roots penetrate, and you want to use organic fertilizers lightly but frequently on the plants when you're getting them established, so that you help encourage the healthy soil. There's all sorts of things living in there between bacteria and fungi, protozoans, mites, worms, nematodes. Almost all of them are adversely affected by both common pesticides and insecticides and all of the sides, as well as chemical fertilizers. So if you can avoid them in the rain garden, you'll get better long-term results. Two other factors I want to touch on with rain gardens: kids and pets. And they are kind of polar opposites. Kids, you definitely want to bring into the rain garden. You want to, as much as possible, involve them in all of the phases: picking the plants, picking the places, digging the holes, installing things. Really make it part of their owner, give them ownership of the rain garden, and they'll appreciate it a lot more. Other thing in this illustration is giving paths through the garden to prevent compaction, but also cute kids. The other item being pets. This should probably affect location in a lot of cases, because if you have a small backyard and you have a dog, they will tear it up. Mine have definitely torn up a lot of landscaping over the years. They like to dig, especially in moist soil. That's where my dogs like to lay on the ground in the summer when it's hot. And then if your rain garden is looking its absolute best, they just love to romp. And if that's a situation you have to deal with, it might be better to put the rain garden in the front yard. So rain gardens are just part of a larger toolkit of green infrastructure. And that includes a lot of standard landscape things like pervious surfaces like rain, regular gardens and turf and things like that, as well as rain gardens, trees, street trees. All of these things help fight the urban heat island, slow and infiltrate water, remove CO2, give off oxygen, plus all of the aesthetic and emotional benefits of having green stuff. It benefits people in general. A couple of other options for that: green roofs, which is essentially a rain garden on a structure, but they usually don't hold quite as much water. So a lot of times you can use a green roof as part of what we call a treatment train. So it'll go from the green roof to a rain garden or something else before the water finally flows off, from big storms. Porous pavements basically turn paved areas into unpaved areas. It's really helpful with trees to have both that water infiltrating and the porous nature of the soil. A lot of tree roots will suffocate under pavement. So the porous pavement has a dual use. Green walls mostly fight heat islands. Some examples of green roofs: Austin City Hall has one. This is essentially the top floor of a parking garage. It's just got a great view. This is an example on a really high-end custom house that is almost underground. Basically, the prairie goes up over the top of it. A couple of green living wall examples. A really complicated one that requires a lot of care and costs a lot of money, but looks awesome. We have a prototype one that's on the UT campus, and then we have sort of the minimum version where the vines are growing up trellises to mitigate that parking garage aesthetically and environmentally. A few other things, as we were talking about earlier, essentially a turf rain garden. These are out at Zilker Disc Golf. They are basically based on water harvesting things, but they're also still rain gardens. They collect water. There was a lot of muddy spots on this golf course until they built these, and now that is essentially mitigated, and it's almost always playable. In swales and things where you're transmitting water, you do log terracing is a form of a check dam. Basically, you slow the water down, and every time you slow it down, some of the pollutants and the nutrients, and especially sediment, are going to fall out, and then the water that moves on will be cleaner. Another example, this is a dry stream bed that's here at our offices. Even more green infrastructure stuff. Planters that treat the water from the gutter. Important thing here is to make sure that the outfall is not next to the foundation. This is an example of porous pavement. This is part of a Green Alley initiative where they went into an alley area and did some planting and caught some stormwater in a part of town that doesn't have stormwater controls. So those benefit a lot from any of those minor controls that you can do. This lower one is a stormwater tree well. Those are sort of a newer thing that we're working with. They use them in a lot of other places, but the idea is to catch the water. So we're doing some water harvesting as well as stormwater mitigation. And then the planters are designed to give more root room for the trees so that we have better survivability for street trees. An expanded version of that is a suspended pavement, like they did at the federal courthouse. This whole area, as far as the trees are concerned, is essentially a lawn. The water falls through it. The roots grow unrestricted and uncompacted underneath it. Fairly complicated, fairly expensive, but when you need a really durable solution for a really high impact location, one of the options. A couple more examples. Porous pavers act pretty much like any other kind of porous pavement. It's an example of a trail out of Peace Park. A little picture of how much water you can actually put on a porous pavement, and it just goes right through. They basically take a graded crushed rock, which is angular, and then they coat it in cement paste. And then by carefully placing it, they keep pore space in there while maintaining strength of concrete. So it's a developing technology, but when it works, it's really great. Chris is going to cover cisterns in his talk, but just a few examples of catch that water as it comes off the roof. And then here's an overflow that goes to another rain garden. They can be very simple. This one just has a hose. They can be really complicated. You can have pumps and all sorts of stuff. And then before we finish up with rain gardens, I thought I'd throw a couple of arty examples. Really, complex, very attractive, but also relatively expensive sorts of things that, sky's the limit with rain gardens. As it is with all gardens, there's just almost endless options of things you can do. Couple more resources. There's some things in the environmental criteria manual, which you can find just by searching for that. The Earthwise Guide to Rain Gardens is one of our publications. That's this one here. Some stuff about rainwater harvesting porous, some stuff about soil decompaction, and then the Grow Green Guide again. Some resources for rebates. Chris will cover those in the next presentation. Some other resources out on the internet from local non-government and governments get even more info. So that's the gist of the short presentation.
Big thank you. I love that you talked about residential gardens, but you showed us lots of great examples of bigger systems around Austin. That was so fascinating, and those trees and the plaza. So thank you for hanging in there. I feel bad because I know you're not feeling so great. So extra kudos to you for being a trooper. And just one thing I thought of when we're talking about slowing down water, I remember at Stacy Park down by Blund Creek, they call it a vegetative filter strip, but it's just a row of big muleys. And so when the water's sheeting down the side to the creek, it just slows it down. I was like, so if nothing else, plant a few big muleys in a row and when the water's flowing so you can help slow it down. So sometimes there might be, I just thought vegetative filter strip sounds so official, but it's just a row of big muleys. Anyhow, look, there's Christopher Charles from Austin Water. We work together a lot. He's been a huge supporter of Grow Green for a long, long time and always says, sure, I'll come and give a talk about rebates when we ask him. So Chris, thank you so much for being here. Tell us how we can maybe save some money doing some of this cool stuff.
Thank you, Denise. Yes, definitely saving some money on these projects does help. And I'll go through all of our programs, and I'll actually focus in on the Rainscape rebate first and the rainwater harvesting rebate as well, right off the bat. But before we get into that, I just want to introduce myself. I've been with Austin Water for almost 14 years. It'll be 14 years this summer. I do have a Master's of Landscape Architecture. I'm not a registered landscape architect, but I find that this work that I do in water conservation to this job as far as my career. I love it. Okay, so you might hear me going in and out. I think my internet connection is a little going a little crazy right now, but it usually kicks me out and puts me right back in. So I apologize if that happens during this presentation. So what I got, why water conservation? Well, we're talking about water quality today, but water conservation is really important right now. Our water supply is at 48%. Also, are we headed for another record this year? You can see that we might be going into stage 3 sometime this summer, which means that people will be having to water less or use less city water. Sorry, you can water as much as you can with your rainwater, but with city water, you'll be having to irrigate your plants less time with our restrictions. One thing I get asked a lot, and that is, where are the applications? If you go to waterwiseaustin.org and you look under rebates, tools, and programs, you'll find a little button that says click here for more information. Actually, it says click here for residential programs. I didn't update. We just changed that button just recently, so I didn't update the presentation. Do not Google. Please do not Google. You'll find some old application from years back that might not be of any, that might just be old and outdated. So we really want you to use our online application. If you're not tech savvy, you can call our main line. I'll give you that information at the very last slide, and you can request a paper application mailed to you. Some of the rebate tips that I have here, just because I get asked these questions so many times, is that some rebates require pre-approval, right? So make sure that you read up on each of the programs that you might be interested in completely, so that you know whether you need to go ahead and get the job done first, then turn in the application, or turn in the application first, then do the work. Also, we ask for receipts, we want to make sure that the receipts show that they're paid in full and not just estimates. We get a lot of estimates that still show a balance due. We do have 10 programs on that list. I think we're going to get rid of the pressure regulating valve one, but also the water provider information is on there. If your water provider is buying water from Austin Water, for example, Rolling Wood, Wells Branch, Sunset Valley, then you're eligible for these rebates. So let's go ahead and dive into the first program, which is the WaterWise Rainscape Rebate Program. And what we're doing is we're giving 50 cents per square foot for building any type of, I guess, green infrastructure, as we said earlier, which includes rain gardens, berms, swales, terraces, and even porous pavement that Drew was talking about earlier. And you're going to see a lot of pictures. I guess Drew and I picked photos from similar places, but you're going to see a lot of the same photos here in this presentation. But basically, we're trying to divert the water off the roof into an area that can collect water. We were talking about types of plants for rain gardens. From talking to the public and people that go into this program, two issues that come up with plants is, one, plant availability. You might have this grand scheme of making this rain garden look awesome, but the plants are just not at the nursery at certain times of the year. And then also plant failure. Please don't get disheartened by plants not making it over the first 6 months or year. Sometimes the plants just don't like the type of soil Sometimes they prefer morning sun to evening sun, and the like. So it's sort of a guessing game. My recommendation is to buy those small plants like Drew was talking about. They can adapt to soils a little bit easier. I wouldn't go over a gallon. Don't be buying 5 gallons unless you know for sure that it's going to be some kind of tree that you want there no matter what, right? So, but if you're just trying to plant seeds or 4-inch pots, that's probably going to be a better idea for those plants. Of course, the pictures are very similar. We've already seen these. But this is one of those programs where you have to get pre-approved before you start work. We need to make sure that you're abiding by the guidelines and that we have enough funding for your project. Here's some pictures of terracing. The slopes that Drew was talking about, we want to try to slow the flow, right? We don't want that water just zipping down to your neighbor's yard. We want to try to keep that water on the property so that it benefits your mature trees. Berms, here's some large scale berms. Basically, the whole area is not depressed, it's just one side. And then you create your rain garden there. Swales, this is what a lot of people do here in town because they're having drainage issues. They want to try to get that water to basically go around areas. In this particular picture, you'll see that they make this swale so the water goes around. They don't want the water going towards their vegetable garden on the slope, so they're making it go around. Here's some other pictures of porous pavement, porous concrete. We've only had one person in the program do porous pavement. There were some issues right up against the house, and she wanted to make sure that water was infiltrating instead of collecting back there. The rainwater harvesting program basically gives 50 cents per gallon for non-pressurized systems. That means rain barrels and cisterns that do not have a pump. If you do include a pump onto your system, we'll give $1 per gallon because when you put a pump onto a cistern that's over 500 gallons, 501 gallons and above, you will need to get a backflow prevention device that is quite expensive. So we're trying to help out with that cost there. The maximum rebate amount is $5,000. Now I remember people asking about roof surface. What's going on with that? What is the best? And Drew was right. Metal roofs are the best for collecting rainwater. Once you start going into those shingle type products that are tar and other stuff that sort of breaks apart over time, you're going to have a little bit more maintenance in your rain barrel or cistern because you're going to have to filter that out because those materials can clog up filters. It can clog up gutters as well. And also the cistern itself, it can collect a lot of material. Now, on our larger cisterns, which are over 500 gallons, we're going to ask you to go ahead and get pre-approved before you start work. We want to make sure that you have a first flush diverter to catch all that sediment right before it goes into the tank. That's going to help you out with maintenance. As far as contractors, I haven't had any issues with any of the contractors here in the region. So if you anywhere in Central Texas, a company that specializes in rainwater harvesting, they should know what they're doing, and they should know about Austin Water rules for the program. There was a question about narrow barrels. That's fine. That's fine. There's a lot of companies that are creating these narrow barrels that go straight up against the house because people want to go ahead and walk around them and not have to squeeze between the cistern and the fence. We do accept those into the program. There's even a new product on the market that has those narrow barrels that look like fence sections, so that the whole fence line can be a rainwater harvesting system. So those are out there. We cannot promote any companies, but I do know that if you look at your home improvement stores and online, you should be able to find them. There's HOA rules sometimes in some HOA neighborhoods that won't allow you to put the cistern in the front yard unless it's screened. Each HOA is different. We can't do anything about that. But for one thing's for certain, they can't tell you that you cannot put in a cistern. They can only tell you to how to screen it and or what to put around it as far as aesthetics and location. They can tell you a location. Now, sometimes you're going to want that cistern in your front yard because of the way that your property slopes, and you might, it might make more sense to put it in the front, but that's when you're going to have to talk to your HOA to see how you can screen it so that it abides by their guidelines. I already talked some about this already. If you're going to get a cistern or a rain barrel, 500 gallons and less, you can go ahead and install it. But we look at combined storage. So if you're putting together 6 100-gallon cisterns, as in this photo here, I know this is just 4, but if there were 6 and they were all 100 gallons, then that's a 600-gallon system, and so that we would ask you to go ahead and get pre-approved before installation. But if it's just something like this where it's a couple of 55 gallons tied together, that's fine. You can go ahead and get them installed and then turn in the receipt with the application. And you may only apply to this. We get this all the time. People don't realize how much they find uses for the rainwater, so they'll go ahead and want more. But in order to go into our program, you have to wait a full 12 months to do that. That's because we're trying to analyze the program to see if it's actually saving water. So we have to look at a year's worth of meter reads to figure that if it's saving water or not. Oh, one more thing about the rainwater harvesting program. Paige said earlier that you can use these cisterns in times of emergency. Austin Water would like for you to definitely use that water in times of emergency, but we want you to flush toilets with that water and use water as you would water that you would get, like reclaimed water or something like that. We do not recommend boiling it and drinking it because unless you have a high-end filtration system, we want you to use city water for drinking because we can guarantee that it's been treated correctly. We don't know about what's been sitting in your tank. So just want to put that out there. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our other outdoor programs. Since I run these programs, I've been running them for years. These are some of our more popular ones. The WaterWise landscape program. We are now giving $100 for every 100 square feet that's converted to from turf grass to native plant beds. So we changed the minimum. It used to be 500. Now people can go ahead and do 200 square feet. That's been helping out a lot of people cost-wise because they do little sections at a time. They call them phases. So they might do 2 or 3 phases, which they can do, and that's fine as long as they hit that max of 3,000 square feet. That's when the rebate sort of stops for them. No artificial turf, no gravelscapes. We are not incentivizing that at the city of Austin. Watershed Protection, Austin Energy, Public Works, and even Parks and Rec, Wildlife Austin have all given me reasons why not to incentivize those treatments. I have to deny about 15% of the applicants because they have already signed contracts with contractors putting in nothing but gravel and cactus. This is not the American Southwest. All that's doing is adding to our heat island for Austin. Got to say that first and foremost. Pre-approval is required for this program, and when I say healthy turf grass, I mean it's got to be grass. It can't be weeds and dirt. So how does it work? Well, you turn in the application, like I said. We'll do a sort of a pre-inspection. I'll look at the grass condition and look at your design. And then once you're approved, you can start doing the work. We only ask that you plant the plants during the spring and fall times, which is what we call spring, March, April, and May, and then fall, September, October, and November. Once you are finished, you turn in photos, you turn in the receipts showing that you're paid, and any changes to the plan. I just had 2 people that signed up for around 500 square feet, and they doubled it. They said, you know what, we didn't realize that we had all this material. We wanted to go from 500 to 1,000 square feet. They just made themselves $500 extra for their project. So the plants must be from the Grow Green Plant Guide. We've talked about that earlier in the presentations. You must have 2 to 3 inches of hardwood mulch as your plant bed treatment. Conversion area must comprise of 50% plant cover at maturity. We just don't want you throwing down mulch and calling it a day. What that means is if you get like 4-inch plants or 1 gallon, perennials, I know exactly how much they're going to spread out. So when your project's done, it might look like a lot of mulch, but I do know that it's going to spread out over time and cover at least 50% of that area. Mature trees will count for that 50% plant coverage. So if you have a mature tree next to the area that you're converting, that tree drip line will cover that in the area. All automatic irrigation systems must be capped off or converted to drip in the conversion area. No new automatic irrigation systems will be allowed. If you don't have one and you put one in, that's sort of just using water in the wrong direction. Automatic irrigation system use the most amount of water. So no turf to turf replacement. Well, we've seen in the past that when somebody goes from like St. Augustine to Buffalo, that they water at the same amount, and that's been proven over the years. I don't know why, it just happens. I guess because they don't, people don't want to see the yellow grass in the summer when it gets above 95 degrees or something to that effect. No new, like I said, no new automatic irrigation systems installed. For those with irrigation systems, we have the irrigation upgrade program. You can get up to $1,000. You or a licensed irrigator must do the work. It must be within 90 days of completing the work that you turn in the application. What we rebate for is or items such as converting spray to multi-stream rotors. When you go to multi-stream rotors, you're using heavier droplets of water that don't turn into fog or mist and are more efficient. You can convert a station or zone to drip. You'll get $50 a zone. You install rain or soil moisture sensors that will shut off the system if there's rain, it just rained, or if the soil's still wet, and we can give you some money for that. Pressure regulating, that's a big thing here in Austin, especially in West Austin. Somebody that lives on the bottom of the hill will have more water pressure than somebody that lives on top of the hill. We will give you money for that. And just converting from a 4-inch spray head to a 6-inch spray head makes all the difference, because those older systems that might have had like a 2 to 3 inch pop-up head, well, guess what? Over time, the grass has grown, and now the water's shooting the tall grass and it's not going over the grass to get where it's supposed to go. So we'll give money for that. And of course, my favorite is capping the station. So if you're just taking out the system completely, we can give you $100 per zone for taking out your system that you don't even use anymore. Maintenance, we talked about maintenance. We do have the Landscape Survival Tools program. If you buy 2 cubic yards of compost or mulch, we can give you $50 for the compost, $40 for the mulch. That is cubic yards. That equals 54 cubic feet, which if you buy 2 cubic foot bags is 27 bags. There's also lawn aeration service. You can get a contractor or you can rent it out at equipment rental store. We can give you $30 for that. We will not give money for tools. So if you buy an aeration tool, you will not be eligible for that rebate. All you have to do in this rebate is it's every 3 years. You buy the stuff, you keep the receipts, you install it, you take photos of the completed work, and then you turn in everything within 90 days. We do have a watering timer program. This sort of acts like an automatic irrigation system for those people that use hose sprinklers. So you hook up your hose to this. You put your sprinkler, your oscillating or I forgot what they call the other one, but you hook up the sprinkler to it and then set the time. And so if you forget, you're cooking your dinner and you forget about your sprinkler that's off in the front yard, it will shut it off for you. We do have a gray water program for residential properties. That's the Laundry to Landscape program. We can give you up to $150 for hooking up a diverter to your clothes washer that diverts the water from that machine out into your yard, where we prefer you putting it into a basin. It can be a basin that has trees or plants. We do have that program. We also have programs for pools. If you switch over to a cartridge pool filter instead of a sand filter that uses the backwash and you waste a lot of water with the backwash of the sand, we can give you money for that new cartridge pool filter. We also have a pool cover program, which allows you to cover the pool when you're going on vacation so that water doesn't basically evaporate. For those of you that go to the library, we do have a couple of conservation tools there. We have one sunlight calculator and then also hose end meter. So the sunlight calculator, you put it in the ground and it tells you whether you have full sun, full shade, part sun, part shade. And then you can go to the Grow Green Plant Guide and you can see what the light categories are for those plants. So you're planting the right plants for the right area. For the hose meter, for those of you that do hose watering, you'll get a better idea of how many gallons you're using when you water. And I just put fresh batteries in all of those devices about 2 months ago. So they're ready to go at the library whenever you're interested. And if they don't have them at your particular branch, they will get them. It'll just take a couple of days for them to drive them over there. We also have free water conservation tools in our office, but we found out that it's difficult for people coming to our office. So what we're doing now is we're mailing, and that's all we're doing is mailing out. So you can call 512-974-2199, and I'll give that number at the very end as well. That's 512-974-2199, and get somebody to fill out a form. I believe there's a form online as well that you can fill out. We're giving out free low flow shower heads, sink aerators, soil moisture meter, and toilet tabs. You put those tabs in the back of your toilet tank, and if you see blue over extended period of time, that means you need to get a new flapper because it's leaking through the flapper. So yeah, that's what I got here for rebates and programs at Austin Water. I'm glad to be working with Watershed Protection on promoting the water conservation programs that also benefit water quality. Here's my direct line, my email, and you can always go to waterwiseaustin.org for more information on water conservation.
And then, of course, with the speakers, we have Paige and Drew, and then we will be sending you out an email. I have a list of about 5 things I'm going to include in that email now for some of the things that we've talked about. So you can be expecting that. And then one thing I thought about when Chris was talking about the libraries, I don't know if you guys know, but the libraries have a tool lending library. So you can like check out a whole set of gardening tools. They have power washers, they have all kinds of cool stuff. So I just learned about this recently, and we'd like to support each other's programs. So I just want to tell you that. We're down to the minute. Look at that, being right on time. Like to keep things on schedule. And so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Paige and Drew and Christopher and Jeff and Katie and Nicole. And yay, I feel very fortunate to get to work with all these amazing people and do this really cool stuff. So have a great day. Thanks for coming. And next time we have another program, we'll be letting you know.